Oh, hey there. Welcome back to Cardboard Brewing Company. I see you're looking for some great cards that many players haven't seen in your games before. Well, I've got quite the selection, so come take a look. This is a card that I haven't seen in a really long time. It used to be in old Commander products back in the day, and so they'd be floating around then, but over time, they've lost their flavor. Their favor, anyways. Avatar of Woe is an 8-mana 6/5, which seems like a really spendy card, because it is. 8 mana is a lot to pay. But the nice thing about Avatar of Woe is that if there are 10 or more creature cards in total in all graveyards, Avatar of Woe costs 6 less to cast, which puts its casting cost at 2 black mana. So cheap. That makes Avatar of Woe at its worst a 2-mana 6/5, which is pretty great. It's a good cost for a card. But it doesn't end there. Avatar of Woe also has Fear, which is a way for it to get in damage easier. It makes it so that this creature can't be blocked except by artifact creatures and or black creatures. So they have to share a color with Avatar of Woe or be an artifact creature. And artifact creatures are already pretty hard to find. They're not a common creature type to have both of those card types on a card. Black creatures are a little easier to find, but not everyone's running a black creature at the moment that you want to swing in with the 6/5. But the best part of Avatar of Woe is the tap ability. You could tap Avatar of Woe to destroy target creature, and it can't be regenerated. It's just an auto point the gun at something, and it's gone card. It's awesome. For 2 mana, you're comparing this to things like Doomblade. Now, Doomblade is a 2-mana instant speed card, and it destroys a target non-black creature. So there's already a whole swath of creatures that it can't even touch because they have black in their casting cost. The benefit of Doomblade is that it costs 2 mana at instant speed, so you can do it when players aren't expecting it and in response to things. Avatar of Woe is a creature, so you have to let it either have haste in order to use its ability right away. It also doesn't have flash, so you have to give it flash to use it at instant speed. But once you have a way to tap this thing, it's instant speed removal on any colored creature. Doesn't matter what it is. You can tap Avatar of Woe on other players' turns and destroy their creatures in response to them equipping them, or enchanting them, or blinking them, all sorts of things that you don't want other creatures to do. Avatar of Woe just taps and destroys it. It's awesome. At the very, very minimum, if you want to be the person at your table that just destroys somebody's commander every time it enters the battlefield, you have a way to do it. This is a repeatable card destruction, and all you got to do is tap Avatar of Woe. And obviously, this thing can get even crazier once you add more cards to the effect. You give it haste, it could do it the turn it comes out. If you give it a way to untap, you can destroy more than 1 creature per turn, which is kind of crazy. For the low cost of 2 mana. One time. You spend 2 mana one time, and you get to do this repeatably. Now, the 10 creatures in all graveyards is the thing holding this card back, because you're not casting this thing on turn 2. But I don't think that cost is that high. Like in a commander game with 4 players, that's like 2 creatures per person and with a couple extra. And if you're playing some kind of mill deck or mill others deck, Avatar of Woe is a slot in. You got to have this card in those kinds of decks. It's just the value is so high. In the random deck that just has black in it, you might not be running Avatar of Woe. And even then, 10 creatures isn't that bad, but you're probably not looking to use this thing till later on in the game. But in any deck that's running mill, you're probably looking to be able to cast this thing pretty regularly on like turn 4, maybe 3 if things are looking good. The thing you have to remember with Avatar of Woe, though, is that because of all of the destroys that it can do over time, this card's going to eat removal so fast. And so the 2 mana cost to cast it is great because it's cheap, but you're going to want to have some way to protect it right out the gate more than likely. 3 other players aren't going to want to let this thing stay on the board for a lot of the game. And so putting this around some protection or ways to bring it back from your graveyard, like the slingshot cards like these ones on screen, they can help this card stick around and be a little bit more sticky on the board and hard to remove. And then it gets all its value in destroying your opponent's creatures, the problematic ones, obviously. Avatar of Woe, I think, is a slept-on removal card. The downsides of it being a little slow because you need the 10 cards in the graveyard and it's a creature that taps. But I don't think that those costs are that bad. And so once you get that cost, this card is a slam dunk. I mean, it's so much value for 2 mana. It's really hard to beat that. All right, let's move to a card that I've gotten so many card draws off of. I love this card. It's so sneaky good. You got to give it a try. Ghostly Pilferer is a 2 mana 2/1, and it says whenever Ghostly Pilferer becomes untapped, you may pay 2. If you do, draw a card, which that's like the worst part about this card. which is still good. If you're attacking with it and you untap it and you pay 2 mana, you get to draw a card. It's nice in a pinch. The next text, though, is where it gets really good. Whenever an opponent casts a spell from anywhere other than their hand, you get to draw a card. And just a reminder, we're playing Commander, where every Commander card is cast not from hand. Those cards are coming in from the command zone. And so anytime someone plays their Commander, you get to draw a card when Ghostly Pilfer is on the battlefield. It's so sick. It's so good. And that does not include cards cast from exile or from the graveyard. There's lots of other places that this can happen, but the most important is from the command zone, is that if players play their Commander, you get to draw. It's great. And lastly, the last part of the text says, discard a card. Ghostly Pilfer can't be blocked this turn. And this is a really nice synergy with the first line of text, where we want this thing to attack so that it becomes tapped. And so now we have a way to get Ghostly Pilfer in for a couple points of damage without any blockers. And then when you untap Ghostly Pilfer, you can pay 2 mana and draw a card. It's a pretty nice little synergy there. There are so many reasons why Ghostly Pilfer is really good in a lot of decks, though. There's so many things that it enables. I already talked about the easy one, which is when somebody casts their Commander, you get to draw. That's a sweet effect for 2 mana, and it just sits on your board, and you get to draw cards passively when people play the game. But the other things that it enables is untap synergies. If you have a lot of untap synergies and you need some card draw, Ghostly Pilfer can get there. 2 mana to draw a card isn't that bad. There are obviously better costed cards that draw you cards for cheaper, but you got to find those cards. If you're already in an untapped synergy and you have this guy here just to draw off commanders coming into play, you also get an extra draw effect by tapping and untapping it a bunch, which is kind of fun. And then other decks like it if you're doing a discard strategy, because this has a free discard effect. You could just pitch a card whenever you want to and give Ghostly Pilfer unblockable. You don't have to be attacking. It doesn't have to be on your turn. It's not only once per turn. It's whenever you want, however many times you want to. It's really good to find discard enablers when you're in decks that are looking to discard cards. And if you haven't done decks like those before, you should try them out. They're really fun. Discarding cards when you have the setup for it is really awesome. And this card does it really cheap. 2 mana to play the creature, and then free discards as whenever you want to, instant speed. It's awesome. One of my favorite discard enablers is actually in the video here on screen. You can watch that after this one if you want to. Currency Converter is a fantastic card that uses the cards you discard to give you even more value. So check that out for more details on Currency Converter. Plus, you've got synergies in decks that like to get in for unblockable damage. Like I've got this guy in my Ninja deck, and Ghostly Pilfer helps out in that deck a ton because I can draw cards off it just sitting there. But when I need to get a ninjutsu activation in, I can just discard a card, send him in unblockable, then bounce him and put my ninja into play. And then it's only 2 mana to put the Ghostly Pilfer back into play. And he's going to draw me cards anyways when opponents cast their commander. Or if I don't bounce the ninja, if I decide to bounce something else, I can untap Ghostly Pilfer on my next turn, pay 2 mana and draw a card. Like, it enables so many things. There's just options all over Ghostly Pilferer, and they're kind of sneaky. It's not overtly, this is what this is for. It does all these things a little bit, and so it fits into so many different decks, and the casting cost is cheap, and the activation costs are cheap too. Give it a shot. Try it out. I think you'll like it a lot. Oh, by the way, before we continue, don't forget to punch your loyalty card by hitting the like button. Remember, if you fill up your loyalty card, you can immediately cast it without paying its mana cost. It's pretty cool. And also, if you're not subscribed, well, let's just say that your tab's running pretty high, and it gets all paid off when you hit the subscribe button. So thanks for doing that. All right, the next card we're looking at is First Response. First Response is a 4 mana enchantment, and it says at the beginning of each upkeep, if you lost life last turn, you create a 1/1 white soldier creature token. Now, I have this card up here for a very specific reason. Any deck that's doing aristocrat-style decks, which are usually black and white decks, they're looking for fodder. They're looking for tokens to just throw into the bin and ping everybody for a point of damage and they gain a life. That's a really common commander archetype, and there's so many enablers of how to sack creatures, and the next step is just to find ways to get creatures cheap. First Response is a one-time 4 mana investment. It sits on the board, and then all you got to do is hit yourself for damage, and you get a 1/1 on the next turn. And you can do that every single turn, not just yours. It's also on your opponent's turns that you can do that. Paying 1 life in an aristocrat-style deck is not hard. There are a lot of cards, especially in black, where you could pay a life or more to get some kind of effect. So if you have that in your deck already, which most of them do, you're getting free 1/1s off of this. I mean, just to name a few commanders off the top of my head, you got Crick, who can pay life for casting black mana spells. You've got Zoraline, which lets you return cards from your graveyard for paying life, which is really nice. And Yawgmoth, the really popular mono black commander, though you wouldn't be able to run first response in that deck. You'd have to have Splash White in there somewhere. But Yawgmoth, you're paying 1 life to put a -1/-1 counter on creatures. You can do that anytime. There's a lot of these little cards in Aristocrats decks that are going to do some sort of damage to yourself. And then you can use that to turn that into a 1/1 token on the next upkeep, which is awesome. And so I think it's something worth looking at. And that's not including any effects that other players are doing to you to make you lose life as well. That's just if you hit yourself to make the 1/1. You've got a whole bunch of commanders out there that are going to be doing damage on all sorts of turns all over the place. Using first response as a political gambit to invite players to hit you for 1 damage or 2 damage because they don't want their thing to die, or they just want to draw a card off the Ghostly Pilferer next turn, and so they want to hit you and not cause you problems. Like, you can invite those attacks and say, hey, just hit me. It's fine. I don't mind. Plus, I get a 1/1 out of it. And right, so it's a deal for everybody. First response gives you lots of options to play the board. You can enable it yourself, which is great, and you can enable other players to enable it for you and get you that 1/1 to then turn in for all of your Aristocrat fodder and all that stuff later on. I think it's a great card. It's a interesting include for the Aristocrat style deck. Remember that it's not per damage that you take that you get a 1/1. It's whenever you take damage at all last turn. Just to put in perspective kind of what first response is similar to, look at this card, this green card. This is a really common token making green card. Now, green can make 8 mana very quickly, but you're paying 8 mana for a 7/7 that makes you a 1/1 sapling creature token each upkeep. Yeah? It's double the mana, but you get a 7/7. That's nice. But arguably, it's easier to remove if it's a creature. Enchantments are harder to remove, in my opinion. I think enchantments don't get removed nearly as much as creatures do. And the low cost is you have to take a point of damage last turn to get your 1/1 every upkeep. I don't think it's that big of a cost to pay to get your 1/1, and then you can turn it in for your Aristocrat stuff. So just wanted to throw some comparison out there to let you see kind of what I'm looking at, why I think this card is good. Is it directly half the price for the same effect? No, you still have to ping yourself for damage. But in the right decks, and there are a lot of decks that do this, this card is a slam dunk for making tokens on every upkeep. This next card is a card that I saw. I was just scrolling through cards one night, and I was like, holy cats, how have I never seen this card before? It's so cool. It's a little spendy in terms of mana cost, but it's really, really awesome. Obsidian Fireheart, a 4 mana 4/4, but it's not just any 4 mana. It's 3 red pips, which is a lot. So you're not really splashing this into tricolor decks or more than likely. A dual color deck, you probably get away with it, and definitely mono red, you're in it, right? And the effect is you pay 3 mana, 2 red pips for that one, and you put a blaze counter on target land without a blaze counter on it. So you look around the board, you find a land that doesn't have a blaze counter on it, which the first activation, none of them have them, right? But your second activation, you can't pick the same land twice. As long as that land has a blaze counter on it, it has, at the beginning of your upkeep, this land deals 1 damage to you. Let's make sure we read that correctly, okay? Just to make sure we're on the same page. You pay 3 mana, you pick a land, you put a blaze counter on it. That land, if it's not yours, right, you were going to put it on somebody else's land, not on yours. You put it on somebody else's land, and at the beginning of their upkeep, they take 1 damage from that land. Then you do this multiple times, right? So every 3 mana you pay, and you do not have to tap Obsidian Fireheart for this ability. So if you have a ton of red mana, you can dump it all into Obsidian Fireheart and just put blaze counters on every opponent's land. Every single one of their lands you put a blaze counter on, and for every land they have, they take a damage. It's pretty dope. The card I immediately thought of that's similar to Obsidian Fireheart, but a different cost point, is Chandra Awakened Inferno. Chandra has a really cool +2 ability that says each opponent gets an emblem with, at the beginning of your upkeep, this emblem deals 1 damage to you. Now, emblems are way better than lands with blaze counters on them. Paying the low cost of a +2 ability on a Planeswalker is way better than paying 3 mana on Obsidian Fireheart. Yeah, but they're different cards, and they're doing different effects. Chandra's 6 mana to cast, and you have to protect the Planeswalker to do it more than once. Obsidian Fireheart is a 4 mana card, and it's a creature, which is actually harder to destroy than a Planeswalker is. Planeswalkers are easier to destroy than creatures are. Now, there is a mana cost for Obsidian Fireheart's ability, so these two cards aren't directly the same. They're not comparable exactly, but that emblem's pretty cool, and there aren't very many opponents out there that are going to sack their lands with blaze counters on them to get rid of the damage pings that they're taking. And really, how many decks out there are running cards that sack lands or destroy their own lands, right? And that's where the fun of this card comes in. You need mana, though. So where are we going to get it? Well, one of my favorite cards in red for getting a lot of red mana is Mana Geyser, which is conveniently placed at 5 mana. The turn after you play Obsidian Fireheart, which is 4 mana, you could play Mana Geyser, which gives you 1 red mana to your mana pool for each tapped land your opponents control. And then you can dump all that red mana into Obsidian Fireheart's ability to put blaze counters on a bunch of your opponent's tapped lands, which is pretty nice. It's a really cool combo. And I like the idea of doing that in a game because those blaze counters aren't going anywhere, more than likely. But there's more that you can do with this card than just put blaze counters on your opponent's lands and hope that they die faster. Because you can put them on your own lands. And why would you want to do that? Well, there are some specific decks that would love to take damage every one of their upkeeps to enable effects, right? One of my favorite commanders is Greven. Greven's a 5 mana 5/5 with Menace that gets +X/+O, where X is the amount of life that you've lost this turn. Well, Obsidian Fireheart, when you put blaze counters on your own lands, and you don't have to put a ton down, you can put 1 or 2. Every one of your turns, you take 1 or 2 damage, and now Greven's a 7/5 with Menace. And if you're doing some kind of Voltron strategy, that's a 3-hit kill instead of a 5-hit kill if you bump it up to 7 power. Or how about Rowan, Sign of War? 3 mana 4/2 with Menace, and you could tap Rowan to give spells you cast this turn that are black or red cost X less to cast, where X is the amount of life that you lost this turn. With Obsidian Fireheart, you can put those blaze counters on your own lands to then enable Rowan to have a mana discount on every turn, and it costs you nothing after the initial blaze counter investment. The rest of the game, you have a way to enable Rowan. There are decks that like to take damage so that you can get effects. Even the card we just talked about, First Response, at least you get 1 free soldier every turn because you lost life on your turn from the blaze counter. I think there's more here than what it looks like, and you can strategically play with these blaze counters, especially the deck that wants to take damage, to put a couple on your own lands so that you enable that every turn for free. And then you can start putting them on your opponent's lands so that it starts pinging them for damage too. And now you've got an engine going, a damage engine, right? Is Obsidian Fireheart going to win a game on its own? No, it's too slow. There's not enough lands and mana in the game to make this happen over time. Oh, and don't forget that you can put Illusionist Bracers on this card and double the effect. So it's kind of like having the mana cost in one sense, right? So there's a few ideas to make the cost a little bit cheaper or at least get some more effects out of it. And for my last card, the Oak Street Innkeeper. It's a 3 mana 1/2 elf. And elf is a very good word here. We like elves in green colors because elf ball is a very common strategy in Commander. And so this will slot into your elf decks pretty easily. It also says as long as it's not your turn, tapped creatures you control have hexproof. And this is really sneaky good because tapping your creatures a lot of times is an instant speed effect. If you've got a card that you own, like any elf mana dork, that taps for green mana, you can tap that at instant speed, and with Oak Street Innkeeper, if it's not your turn, it has hexproof. So you could dodge removal really quickly with Oak Street Innkeeper by just keeping your creatures untapped, waiting for players to target your stuff, and then you tap them in response, right? Really fun way for Oak Street Innkeeper to go crazy with the hexproof. Another really awesome spot for Oak Street Innkeeper, like every elf deck is any aggressive deck. Decks that you're attacking a lot with creatures, which obviously taps them. Now that means that when it's not your turn, those creatures now have hexproof, so players have a hard time removing them after they've been attacked with them, which means you can use them the next turn. The downside here is obvious though. They don't have hexproof when it's your turn. But you need to look at this another way. It's actually a huge upside to have your opponents cast their cards on your turn so that you can respond with your own things. You can play more cards down. You can play out your counter spells and all that stuff on your turn, and everything's out in the open. If they get to do things before their turn starts, it's the most efficient use of mana for them. But if they have to do it on your turn and do things earlier than they want to because they have to get around hexproof, you're actually forcing their hand to do the things they were going to do anyways to get rid of your stuff. And it lets you set up then positions for how do I protect these things on my turn. And with that in mind, you can play cards alongside Oak Street Innkeeper like Surak Elusive Hunter, which says this card can't be countered, it has trample, but most importantly, it says whenever a creature you control or a creature spell you control becomes the target of a spell or an ability an opponent controls, you draw a card. So now with Oak Street Innkeeper, on your turn is the only time your stuff can get targeted by your opponents. And if you have Surak out, if they target it, you get to draw a card. When it's not your turn, Oakstreet Innkeeper is protecting all of your tapped creatures, which is fantastic. You can also play not a legendary creature that does a similar thing called Hermit of Natternulls. It says whenever an opponent casts a spell during your turn, draw a card. And on the back side, if you flip it, whenever an opponent casts a spell during your turn, you draw 2 cards, which is crazy. That value is insane. And so Oakstreet Innkeeper can enable cards like these because you're forcing your opponents to cast spells during your turn to remove your stuff because they don't have hexproof, and then you get to draw off them afterwards, which is awesome. Getting players to do things against your board is never good. You want them to point their removal at other stuff, but if they're gonna point your removal, it's better to do it on your turn when you can do your responses, like play a card after they take out one of your cards, versus having to wait till your turn comes around to do it later. Imagine a scenario where somebody removes your 5 mana 8/8 and it's gone from the board. Well, all you got to do is respond by saying, okay, well, I'll cast now another 5 mana 8/8. They have to deal with that afterwards, but they're forced to do it on your turn. So they can't have a ton of removal and they have to leave mana up just for your turn to deal with it if they're going to deal with your stuff. So it's an interesting protection spell. And the benefit here is that it protects all of your tapped creatures versus other protection spells are normally protecting one creature spell. So this lets you dodge a lot of stuff that like multi-target, or you've got like this really menacing board of stuff that multiple things need to be removed if it's not responded to, and Oakstreet Innkeeper keeps multiple of those things protected when it's not your turn. And I think the most fun part about this card for me anyways is in decks that use a lot of tap and untap abilities, you can kind of mess with your opponents. You leave your stuff untapped, and on their turns they can target it because it doesn't have hexproof anymore, but then you can instant speed tap it either with its own tap ability or a card in your hand that you use it to tap it to pay a cost for something. Things like that, and then they get to dodge removal while you get to activate your thing. There's some sneaky little interactions there that can keep your opponents on your toes on whether they want to interact with things on not your turn and force them to interact with things on your turn, which is actually better for you. If you're ever going to be interacted with it, you may as well get interacted on your turn so you can respond to it. There's so many cards to try in Commander, so I'm going to keep on digging to see if I can find some interesting flavors for you to try out and brew with. And don't miss out on other cards I've already talked about. Maybe like this one over here.